Ambassador Min-Jun Park stood in the Grand Assembly Chamber and tried not to show his fear. The chamber was massive, built to hold representatives from 847 different species. Some breathed oxygen like humans did. Others lived in tanks filled with methane gas. A few were made of living crystal that hummed with soft light. Min-Jun had been coming to this chamber for 8 years now, and he still felt small every time he walked through its doors. Today was supposed to be a normal session. Min-Jun had reviewed the agenda that morning over coffee in the human embassy. There would be votes on trade routes, discussions about scientific exchanges, maybe an argument about mining rights in some distant system. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would change anything. He had been wrong. Ambassador Velkara of the Throne Collective rose from her seat. The Throne Collective was old, one of the first species to join the Concordance thousands of years ago. They looked almost like giant insects, with smooth black shells and too many legs. Velkara's voice came through the translation device as smooth and polite. "I introduce Emergency Resolution 4477, she said, the Quarantine and Managed Decline Protocol for the Kashari species. Min-Jun felt his aide Ji-Won stiffen beside him. They had heard rumors about this resolution, but seeing it formally introduced was different. The Kashari were a young species, new to space travel. Their home world was dying. Pollution from their factories had poisoned their air and water. Their crops were failing. They had asked the Concordance for help. Velkara explained the resolution in calm, reasonable words. The Kashari needed help, yes, but they also needed management. Their population was too large for their dying world. The resolution would place them under Concordance protection. Resources would be carefully managed. Population would be reduced to sustainable levels over time. It was all very civilized, very logical. Ji-Won was typing frantically on her datapad. Min-Jun glanced down and saw numbers appearing on his own screen. Ji-Won had broken down the mathematics hidden in the resolution's appendices. The sustainable population level was 30% of current Kashari numbers. 70% would die over 3 generations through managed resource restriction. It was genocide with mathematics and polite language. Min-Jun raised his hand to request the floor. The assembly moderator, an ancient being that looked like floating smoke, acknowledged him. Min-Jun stood and felt all those alien eyes turn toward him. "I have studied this resolution carefully," he said. His voice was steady, even though his heart was racing. "I want to make sure I understand it correctly." He pulled up the data on the main display that all delegates could see. The resolution says the Kashari population must be reduced to sustainable levels. The mathematics show this means reducing their population by 70%. That is 7 billion Kashari lives over 3 generations. Some delegates shifted in their seats. Others remained perfectly still. Min-Jun continued. The resolution also includes cost projections for the quarantine infrastructure. Those costs are substantial. My team has done an analysis. He brought up new numbers. The same resources could instead fund atmospheric processors, water purification systems, and agricultural technology for the Kashari homeworld. Using this approach, the ecological crisis could be solved in approximately 10 years. The Kashari population would not need to be reduced at all. The chamber was quiet. Min-Jun looked around at the assembled delegates. When humanity joined the Concordance 23 years ago, we were told this organization existed to protect and uplift younger civilizations. We were told the Concordance valued all sapient life. I ask now, is that true? Or do we value convenience more than we value life? He sat down. His hands were shaking slightly, so he pressed them flat against his desk. Ji-Won gave him a small nod. Across the chamber, Ambassador Thelnax of the Quentari Union, who had mentored Min-Jun when humanity first joined, was watching him with an unreadable expression. The debate that followed was brief. A few other younger species spoke against the resolution. Most delegates said nothing. When the vote came, Min-jun watched the numbers climb on the display. 731 in favor, 103 against, 13 abstentions. The resolution passed. Min-jun sat very still. Around him, the assembly was already moving to the next agenda item. Velkara was thanking delegates for their wisdom and careful consideration. The moderator was calling for the next speaker. Everything was continuing as normal, as if 7 billion lives had not just been casually condemned to death. He thought about the Kashari. He had never met one in person, but he had seen pictures. They were graceful beings with 6 limbs and large eyes, their bodies covered in soft fur that changed colors with their moods. They had music and art. They had children who played games. They had grandparents who told stories. And the Concordance had just voted to slowly kill 70% of them, because it was cheaper than actually helping. Min-jun stood up. He did not say anything. He simply started walking toward the massive doors at the far end of the chamber. Behind him, he heard chairs moving. His entire staff was standing up. Sarah Chen, the alternate delegate, Colonel Tai Hyun Kwan, the military liaison, Dr. Priya Mehta Kim, the cultural attaché. All 47 humans in the chamber rose and followed him. The assembly fell silent. This did not happen. Species did not just leave. They might argue. They might vote no. They might file formal protests. But they did not walk out. The Concordance had existed for 5,000 years, and no species had ever simply walked away from a session. Min-jun kept walking. His footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet. Behind him, 47 pairs of human feet made a steady rhythm on the polished floor. "Ambassador Park," Velkara's voice cut through the silence. "Is humanity withdrawing from the Concordance?" Min-jun stopped. He turned and looked back at the assembly. 847 species, some of them thousands of years old, all watching him. He was 38 years old. His species had barely learned to leave their own solar system, but he knew what he had to say. "Humanity is not withdrawing from the Concordance," he said clearly. "We will maintain our embassy. We will honor all existing treaties and agreements, but we cannot sit in a chamber that has just voted for genocide. We will return when the Kashari are safe or when we no longer recognize the organization before us as the Concordance we joined." He turned back toward the doors. The humans walked out together. Behind them, the Grand Assembly chamber erupted into chaos. The walk to the embassy felt longer than usual. Min-jun kept his pace steady and his face calm, but inside, he was replaying the moment over and over. Had he just destroyed humanity's standing in galactic politics? Had he been right to walk out, or had his emotions overruled his judgment? Ji-won walked beside him, quiet until they were safely inside the embassy compound. Then she let out a long breath. "Sir, my communication panel is exploding. Every news network in the galaxy wants a statement." "Tell them we have no comment at this time," Min-jun said. He headed straight for the secure communication room. "I need to talk to Earth." The quantum communication link took a few minutes to establish. When the screen finally lit up, Min-jun saw the faces of Earth's diplomatic council. Secretary General Maria Santos spoke first. "We saw the broadcast, Min-jun. What happened?" He told them everything: the resolution, the mathematics, the vote, the walkout. When he finished, there was a long silence. Finally, Director Yuki Tanaka from the Asian Coalition spoke. "You understand this could isolate us? We are one species among hundreds. We have no unique technology, no strategic resources they desperately need." "I understand," Min-jun said. "But I also understand what it means to sit quietly while genocide happens. We teach our children about the mistakes of our history. We promise to never again stand by while others suffer. This was the moment to prove whether we meant those words." "Some will call this naive," Secretary General Santos said, but she was smiling slightly. "The council is divided, Min-jun. But I will tell you this. You spoke for many of us today. You have authorization to proceed as you see fit. We cannot promise unlimited resources, but Earth supports you. The call ended. Min-jun sat back in his chair and closed his eyes. Support was good, but support alone would not save the Kashari. Over the next several days, the galactic response was exactly what Min-jun expected. The news networks called humanity's walkout a tantrum, a naive gesture from a young species that did not understand how the galaxy really worked. Political analysts said humanity had damaged its reputation beyond repair. The Throne Collective issued a polite statement saying they regretted humanity's emotional response and hoped humans would learn to approach difficult decisions with more maturity. But something else was happening too. Min-jun started receiving private messages. The first came from Ambassador Thelnax. It was brief. You did the right thing. Some of us remember what it means to have principles. Give me time. Other messages followed from delegates who had voted against the resolution, a few who had abstained, even one or two who had voted yes but now seemed uncertain. On the 5th day after the walkout, Min-jun called a meeting of the entire human diplomatic staff. They gathered in the embassy's main conference room, 47 people who had followed him out of the assembly without question, trusting his judgment. He owed them honesty. We cannot stop the Concordance from implementing their protocol, he said. We do not have that power, but we can do something else. We can prove there was another way. We can save the Kashari ourselves. Sarah Chen leaned forward. How? We don't have the resources of the entire Concordance. No, Min-jun agreed, but we have every human colony, every corporation, every university and research station. What if we ask them all to help? Dr. Priya Mehta-Kim was already pulling up data on her pad. The Kashari need atmospheric processors, water purification, agricultural technology. We have all of that. Human colonies use it. The technology is not exotic or rare. It is just standard environmental systems. Exactly, Min-jun said. We can send ships, equipment, volunteers. We can teach the Kashari how to save themselves. Colonel Tai Hyun-kwan, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. This will be expensive, and it might fail. If we try to save them and fail, we look even worse. Yes, Min-jun said simply. But if we do nothing, we are no different from the delegates who voted yes. We just have cleaner hands. The vote was unanimous. The humans would act. Min-jun sent the proposal to Earth that evening. He called it the Kashari Initiative. He asked for volunteers and resources. He expected some response, but what happened surprised even him. Within 3 days, 17 human ships were being loaded with equipment. Universities were sending their best environmental scientists. Corporations were donating water processors and atmospheric scrubbers. Individual citizens were crowdfunding to send more supplies. Earth's media covered it constantly. Interviews with volunteers heading to the Kashari homeworld, engineers explaining how the technology worked, teachers preparing lesson plans to share with Kashari students. Humanity was not just sending aid. They were sending themselves. The galactic news networks noticed. At first, they covered it as a curiosity. Look at the naive humans trying to save a dying world. But as the ships launched and more kept coming, the tone started to change. Analysts began calculating costs and comparing them to the Concordance's protocol. Some admitted the numbers were surprisingly close. Others still insisted it would fail, that humanity did not understand the complexity of terraforming a damaged biosphere. Min-jun watched it all from the embassy. He had not returned to the assembly chamber. Every day, the empty human seats were visible in the broadcasts of assembly sessions. Some species had called for humanity to be expelled entirely for the insult. Others had defended humanity's right to protest. But the Throne Collective had simply moved on, treating the whole incident as a temporary distraction from serious business. 2 weeks after the walkout, Min-jun received a message from the first ship to reach the Kashari homeworld. The message was from Dr. Ji-won Choi, his former aide, who had volunteered to join the first wave. She sent a video. The Kashari homeworld looked gray and sick from orbit. The clouds were dark, and the rivers were visible as brown streaks across the continents. But the video showed something else, too. It showed Kashari standing at the landing site, their fur shifting through colors that the translation software said meant hope and fear mixed together. It showed human engineers already unloading equipment, working alongside Kashari volunteers who wanted to learn. Ji-won's face appeared on screen. She looked tired, but excited. "Ambassador, we have begun work. The Kashari are incredible. They are not waiting to be saved. They are saving themselves. We are just giving them the tools." Min-jun played the video 3 times. Then he composed a message to Earth. "The initiative has begun. Recommend continuing support. First reports are promising." That night, he stood in the embassy garden and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Kashari were fighting for their survival. Somewhere else, the Grand Assembly was continuing its work without humanity present. The galaxy thought the walkout was a meaningless gesture. But Min-jun knew something they did not. Gestures had power. Walking out of the assembly had been a statement. But this, what humanity was doing now, this was the answer. They had not just refused to participate in something wrong. They had offered an alternative. They had shown that another path existed. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen. Dr. Ji-won Choi stood on the surface of the Kashari homeworld and tried to remember what blue sky looked like. The sky here was gray, a thick gray that seemed to press down on everything. The air smelled wrong, full of chemicals and dust. Her breathing mask filtered out the worst of it, but she could still taste the pollution on her tongue. "Dr. Choi?" A Kashari named Renshaw approached her. Renshaw was smaller than Ji-won, with 6 graceful limbs and large eyes that reflected light like mirrors. Her fur was currently a muddy brown color, which the translation device said meant worry and determination mixed together. "The water purification system is ready for testing." Ji-won followed Renshaw to the river. A week ago, this river had been brown with pollution, full of chemicals from nearby factories. Dead fish floated on the surface. Now, 3 large purification units sat on the riverbank, humming quietly. Kashari engineers worked alongside human volunteers, checking connections and running diagnostics. "Activate it," Ji-won said. The machines came to life with a deeper hum. Water flowed through intake pipes, disappeared into the processing units, and emerged from output pipes on the other side. Ji-won watched as Renshaw collected a sample in a clean container. They ran the analysis together, human and Kashari leaning over the same testing equipment. The results came back. Clean water. Not perfect, but safe enough to drink. Safe enough for fish to live in. Renshaw's fur shifted to a bright gold color that meant joy. Around them, other Kashari began making a sound like wind chimes, which Ji-won had learned was their equivalent of cheering. But Ji-won did not celebrate yet. She pulled up the schematics for the purification system on her datapad and handed it to Renshaw. "Now you need to learn how this works, how to maintain it, how to repair it when it breaks. Eventually, how to build more of them." Renshaw took the datapad carefully. "You are teaching us everything?" "Yes," Ji-won said. "We are not here to save you. We are here to give you the tools to save yourselves." That conversation was being repeated across the Kashari homeworld. Human volunteers were working at 17 different sites, installing atmospheric processors, setting up water purification systems, helping repair damaged farmland. But everywhere they went, they brought Kashari partners with them. Every installation included complete technical documentation. Every process was explained in detail. The humans were not creating dependency. They were transferring knowledge. The galactic news networks were paying attention now. What started as mockery had become something else. A Quentari journalist named Rilmora had traveled to the Kashari homeworld expecting to document humanity's failure. Instead, her reports showed something different. She showed Kashari engineers learning to operate atmospheric processors. She showed children playing in rivers that had been dead a month ago. She showed the sky beginning to lighten as the air slowly cleared. "The humans are not acting like conquerors," Rilmora reported. "They are not even acting like saviors. They work beside the Kashari as equals. They teach everything they know. This reporter has covered many Concordance aid missions, but this is different. The humans seem to actually want the Kashari to succeed on their own." The report went viral across the galactic networks. Suddenly, species that had ignored the Kashari crisis were asking questions. If humanity could help with relatively simple technology, why had the Concordance insisted the protocol was necessary? What made managed population decline the only solution? Minjun watched from the embassy as the political situation shifted. 3 species that had voted for the protocol publicly stated they regretted their vote. 5 more submitted formal requests for information on the initiative's methods and costs. Most importantly, several species began quietly sending their own aid to the Kashari home world, not through official concordance channels, but directly. The Velkara and the Throne Collective issued statements dismissing the initiative as a temporary fix that would fail once the humans lost interest. But they notably did not interfere. They could not without proving that they opposed the Kashari being saved. Ambassador Thelnax contacted Minjun for the first time since the walkout. The old Quentari's face appeared on the screen, his skin plates shifting in a pattern Minjun had learned meant approval. "You have started something, my friend. The younger species are asking questions that should have been asked long ago." "What kind of questions?" Minjun asked. "They are looking at history," Thelnax said. "Did you know the protocol has been implemented 17 times? 17 species, all of them now reduced to small populations on their original worlds while the Concordance administers their systems. The younger species are asking why this happens so often. Why aid always comes with population reduction." Minjun felt cold. 17 species? Yes. All of them struggling with environmental or resource crises. All of them offered the same solution. And now the Kashari would have been the 18th, except humanity offered an alternative. Thelnax leaned closer to the screen. "Do you understand what you have revealed? The protocol is not about saving species. It is about controlling them." The conversation stayed with Minjun long after the call ended. 17 species. How many billions of lives had been lost to what the Concordance called managed decline? How many civilizations had been reduced to shadows of themselves, all in the name of stability and careful resource management? 3 months after the walkout, Jiwan sent her most important report yet. The Kashari homeworld's atmosphere had measurably improved. River systems were recovering. Agricultural production was increasing. But more than that, the Kashari themselves had taken full ownership of the recovery. Human advisors remained, but now they worked alongside Kashari experts who understood their own world's needs better than any outsider could. "We estimate the crisis will be fully resolved in 7 years, Jiwan reported. "Ahead of our original 10-year projection, the Kashari are not just surviving, they are thriving." The report included videos. Kashari children playing in parks that had been toxic wastelands months ago. Factories retrofitted with clean technology, still producing goods but no longer poisoning the planet. Kashari engineers teaching other Kashari how to maintain the systems, creating a knowledge base that would persist long after the humans left. Minjun forwarded the report to Earth and to every species that had voted against the protocol. He also sent it to Thelnax with a simple message: this was possible. This was always possible. The response was immediate. 32 species submitted a joint petition to the Assembly demanding a review of the protocol system. They wanted to know why the Keshari solution had not been offered to the 17 previous species. They wanted to know what made population reduction necessary when technology transfer and education could solve the same problems. The Assembly was forced to respond. Velkara gave a long speech about how each situation was unique, how the protocol had prevented greater suffering, how stability sometimes required difficult choices. But her words rang hollow now. Everyone had seen the Keshari recovery. Everyone knew another way existed. More importantly, the younger species were no longer staying quiet. They formed a coalition, 57 species strong, all of them demanding reform. They wanted the protocol system abolished. They wanted existing trusteeships reviewed. They wanted the concordance to become what it claimed to be, an alliance of equals, not a hierarchy maintained through controlled extinction. The Grand Assembly called an unprecedented month-long recess to consider the demands. For the first time in 5,000 years, the elder species did not have automatic control of the agenda. The younger civilizations had found their voice, and it had all started with 47 humans walking out of a chamber because they refused to participate in something wrong. Ambassador Thelnax stood before the Grand Assembly and felt old. She had served in this chamber for 63 years, longer than most humans lived. She had seen thousands of debates, voted on tens of thousands of resolutions. She had always believed the concordance was good, that it protected and uplifted younger species. But now she understood what Minjun must have felt that day 6 months ago. Sometimes the hardest thing was realizing you had been wrong. "I request the floor to discuss Resolution 4477, she said. "The Keshari Protocol." Velkara, still in her seat, made a dismissive gesture. "That matter is closed. The protocol was approved by proper vote. The fact that humanity chose to waste resources on an alternative approach does not change the legitimacy of our decision." "I am not questioning the legitimacy," Thelnax said carefully. "I am questioning the necessity. The human initiative has proven the Keshari crisis could be resolved without population reduction. This raises an important question. If the protocol was not necessary for the Keshari, was it necessary for the 17 species who came before them?" The chamber went very quiet. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward with interest. The 17 previous protocols were part of Concordance history, but they were old history. Most species did not think about them anymore. Thelnax pulled up historical data on the main display. The Vexnar, 3,000 years ago, their world faced ecological collapse. The protocol reduced their population by 60%. They now number 8 million, living on a small continent while the Concordance administers the rest of their system. She changed the display. The Kelthar, 1,500 years ago. Population reduced by 75%. Current population, 3 million. Another change. The Mortish, 900 years ago. Population reduced by 80%. Current population, 600,000. She went through all 17 species. Each one told the same story. Crisis, protocol, population reduction, permanent concordance trusteeship. Together, those 17 species had lost tens of billions of lives over the centuries. "I asked the Assembly," Thelnax said, "would these species still be shadows of their former selves if they had received the kind of help humanity gave the Keshari? Would they now be full members of the Concordance instead of permanent wards?" Velkara rose angrily. "You oversimplify. Each situation was unique. The protocols prevented catastrophic wars over resources. They maintained stability across the galaxy. The cost was high, but the alternative would have been worse." "Would it?" Thelnax asked. "Or is that just what we tell ourselves to feel better about what we did?" The debate that followed was fierce. The elder species defended the protocol system. They presented data showing how protocols had prevented conflicts, maintained peace, ensured stability for 5,000 years. They were not wrong. The galaxy had been stable under their guidance. But stability at what cost? The younger species, emboldened by the Kashari success, pushed back. They pointed out that all of the protocol species had been young civilizations, barely spacefaring, with no way to resist concordance decisions. They noted that every elder species had been allowed to grow to full strength before joining the concordance. Why were younger species held to different standards? And then Thelnax revealed something that changed everything. Her research team had been digging through ancient records, files from before the concordance was formally established. What they found was disturbing. The elder species, she said, all went through managed transitions in their own histories. Before they joined together to form the concordance, they had their own crises, their own population adjustments. They know from personal experience that such transitions are survivable. But here is what is interesting. In every case, they managed their own transitions. They were not controlled by outside forces. They made their own difficult choices and emerged stronger. She paused, letting that sink in. The protocol system does not give younger species that chance. It does not let them make their own hard choices and grow from them. Instead, it keeps them small, manageable, permanently dependent on concordance oversight. This is not protection. This is control. The chamber erupted. Elder species delegates were shouting denials. Younger species delegates were demanding answers. The moderator struggled to maintain order, and through it all, the empty human seats remained visible, a silent reminder of the species that had chosen to leave rather than be complicit. Over the following weeks, the political situation became chaotic. The coalition of younger species grew to 89 members. Several elder species experienced internal splits, with faction groups breaking away to support reform. The Throne Collective tried to hold the traditional bloc together, but cracks were showing. The crisis came when the Kashari government formally requested concordance membership. They were sponsored by humanity, though Min Jun still had not returned to the assembly chamber. The request should have been routine. The Kashari were stable now, their world recovering ahead of schedule. They met all the requirements for membership, but Velkara moved to block it. The Kashari are not yet ready. Their world is still in recovery. They need more time under concordance guidance before they can shoulder the responsibilities of full membership. Ren Shah, the Kashari representative, stood in the visitors' gallery. Her fur had turned a deep red color that meant anger. You mean you want to place us under a trusteeship, like the 17 species before us? You want to control us permanently? We want to protect you, Velkara said. We do not need that kind of protection, Renshaw said. Humanity taught us something. They taught us that real help means giving people the tools to help themselves, not making them dependent, not controlling them forever. The gallery erupted in support. Younger species delegates began chanting for a vote. The moderator tried to restore order but failed, and then on every screen in the chamber, a message began playing. It was from Min Jun, the first time he had addressed the assembly since the walkout. His face appeared, calm and serious. I am sending this message because the Kashari have asked for my support. 6 months ago, I walked out of the assembly because I could not participate in genocide. Today, I ask you all a question. Is the concordance an alliance of equals? Or is it a hierarchy maintained through controlled extinction? He paused. Humanity was allowed to join because we arrived with starships and colonies. We were already too established to quietly manage. We were strong enough that you had to accept us as equals. Is that truly the standard for belonging? Must species be powerful enough to resist you before they deserve respect? Another pause. The Kashari are strong now, not because of weapons or territory, but because they saved themselves with help freely given. They learned. They adapted. They proved their worth not through force, but through perseverance. If that is not enough for membership, then the concordance is not what I thought it was. The message ended. The chamber was silent. Then Thelnax stood. I call for an immediate vote on Keshari membership. Velkara tried to block it, but the moderator, reading the mood of the chamber, allowed it. The vote was close. Many elder species voted no, still clinging to the old ways, but enough voted yes, swayed by 6 months of watching the Keshari recovery, by the questions that had been raised, by the realization that the galaxy was changing whether they liked it or not. The result flashed on the screens. 439 to 408. The Keshari were accepted as the 848th member of the Concordance. Rensha's fur turned bright gold. In the gallery, younger species delegates were celebrating. But the real victory was larger than one species joining. The vote showed that the elder species no longer had automatic control. The younger civilizations had found their voice and their power. That night, Minjun received a message from Thelnax. The Reformation Summit is being called. 1 month from now. The protocol system will be debated formally. Your presence is requested. Minjun looked at the empty seats in his embassy conference room, the places where his staff would sit when they returned from the Keshari homeworld. He thought about the 7 billion Keshari lives that had been saved. He thought about the 17 species that had not been saved. He sent his reply. I will be there. Minjun stood outside the Grand Assembly Chamber and felt like he was about to walk into battle. 7 months had passed since he had last stood in this place. 7 months since he had walked out with his entire delegation behind him. Now he was walking back in, but everything had changed. The chamber was packed, every seat was filled, and the visitor galleries were overflowing. This was not a normal session. This was the Reformation Summit, called to decide the future of the Concordance itself. The question before them was simple but enormous. Would the protocol system be abolished? Would the 17 species under permanent trusteeship be given paths to full sovereignty? Would the Concordance transform from a hierarchy into a true alliance of equals? Minjun walked down the center aisle to the human section. His footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet. Every eye in the chamber followed him. When he reached the human seats, still empty after all these months, he stopped and turned to face the assembly. Thank you for allowing me to return, he said. His voice carried through the translation systems to every species present. I am here because the Keshari asked me to support them, and because this is a conversation about the kind of galaxy we want to build. I am honored to be part of it. He sat down. Behind him, the rest of the human delegation filed in, returning to their seats for the first time since the walkout. The chamber remained quiet until everyone was seated. Then the moderator called the summit to order. The debate lasted for hours. Velkara and the traditional bloc argued passionately that the protocol system had maintained galactic stability for 5,000 years. They presented data showing conflicts that had been prevented, resources that had been preserved, suffering that had been avoided. They were not lying. The protocols had worked, in a sense. The galaxy had been stable. But at what cost? Demanded Ambassador Rintalk of the Felmari, one of the younger species. Stability built on the graves of billions is not peace. It is control dressed in kind words. The elder species countered that the alternatives had always been worse, that unchecked population growth on dying worlds led to wars, to suffering beyond measure, that the protocols, harsh as they were, saved more lives than they cost. They painted the reformers as naive, emotional, unable to make the hard choices that true leadership required. Thelnax responded for the Reform Coalition. You speak of hard choices, but who made those choices? Not the species whose populations were reduced, not the people who died slowly over generations as resources were restricted. The protocols were hard for them. For us, Sitting in this comfortable chamber, they were easy. We never had to watch our children starve. We just had to vote and then forget. The words hit hard. Some elder species delegates looked away. Others remained defiant, but cracks were showing in the traditional bloc. Then the reformers presented their alternative. They called it the Alternative Development Framework. Instead of protocols that reduced populations, species in crisis would receive coordinated aid similar to what humanity had given the Kashari. Technology transfer, education, support that empowered species to solve their own problems. The costs would be comparable to protocol implementation, but the outcomes would be completely different. We are not saying there should be no intervention, Thelnax explained. We are saying intervention should help species thrive, not manage their decline. We are saying the goal should be independence, not permanent control. Velkara stood to respond. She looked tired, older than she had 7 months ago. And if they fail? If we give them resources and they squander them? If their worlds still die despite our help? Then we try again, said a new voice. Minjun looked up to see Renshaw standing in the Kashari section. She had been granted speaking rights as a new member species. Her fur was a steady silver color that meant determination. When humanity came to our world, we were dying. We had made mistakes. Terrible mistakes that poisoned our air and water. We were ashamed. We were desperate. And when the Concordance voted to let 70% of us die, we thought that was what we deserved. She paused, and the chamber was absolutely silent. But then humans came, and they did not tell us we deserved to die. They did not manage our decline. They gave us tools and knowledge. They worked beside us. They believed we could save ourselves, and we did. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but we did it. Renshaw looked directly at Velkara. You ask what happens if we fail after being given help. I ask, what happens to a species that is never given the chance to try? What happens to people who are told from the beginning that they are too weak, too flawed, too problematic to save? You do not just kill their bodies with protocols, you kill their hope, you kill their belief that they matter. The chamber erupted. Younger species delegates rose to their feet in support. Even some elder species were nodding. The tide was turning. Finally, the moderator called for Minjun to speak. He had been sitting quietly, listening to the debate. Now he stood and walked to the central platform where all could see him clearly. I want to tell you why humanity walked out, he said. It was not because we thought we were better than you. It was not because we wanted to judge you. We walked out because we could not find another way to say that something was wrong. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of species. Every human child learns about our history. We learn about times when our ancestors did terrible things because those things seemed necessary, because stability mattered more than justice, because it was easier to look away than to act. We learn about the people who stood up and said no, even when saying no cost them everything. And we promise ourselves we will be like those people if we ever face such a choice. Minjun's voice grew stronger. 7 months ago, I faced that choice. I could stay in my seat, vote no, file a formal protest, and then watch 7 billion Kashari die while maintaining my diplomatic comfort. Or I could walk out. I chose to walk out not because I knew what would happen next, but because I could not stay. He paused. I have been asked if humanity believes it is morally superior to the elder species. We do not. We have made terrible mistakes in our history. We will make more mistakes in our future. But we believe that recognizing a mistake and changing is not weakness. It is the most important kind of strength. Minjun looked at Velkara. You built something remarkable 5,000 years ago. The Concordance brought peace to a chaotic galaxy. You saved countless lives, but somewhere along the way, maintaining that system became more important than the principles it was built on. The protocols worked, but they worked by sacrificing the weak to preserve the strong. And that is not protection. That is not what any of us should want." He turned to address the entire assembly. "The alternative development framework is not perfect. Species will still face crises. Some will still fail despite our help. But at least they will fail because circumstances were too difficult, not because we decided they were not worth saving. At least we will have tried to help them succeed instead of managing their extinction." The vote came that evening. The alternative development framework against the continuation of the protocol system. The numbers climbed slowly on the displays. Every delegate watched in silence. The elder species had fought hard to maintain their system, but the 7 months since the walkout had changed too much. Too many questions had been raised. Too many species had seen another way was possible. The final count appeared. 476 to 369. The alternative development framework passed. The protocol system was abolished. The 17 species under trusteeship would be reviewed for paths to sovereignty. The concordance would begin the painful process of transforming from a hierarchy into something more like the alliance of equals it had always claimed to be. In the Kashari section, Renshaw's fur blazed gold. The Reform Coalition erupted in celebration. Some elder species sat in stunned silence. Others, like Thelnax, looked relieved, as if a weight had been lifted. Velkara sat very still, her expression unreadable. The session ended. Delegates began filing out. Min-jun stood and turned to leave. As he reached the aisle, he heard a sound. It started with Thelnax, a slow, rhythmic gesture of respect in the Quentari fashion. Then it spread. Renshaw and the other Kashari delegates joined. The entire Reform Coalition. Even a few elder species. It was not applause. It was something quieter, more solemn. Acknowledgement, respect, recognition that something important had changed. Min-jun walked out of the chamber with his delegation behind him. Outside, in the corridor, Sarah Chen spoke quietly. "What happens now?" "Now the hard work begins," Min-jun said. "Changing the rules was the easy part. Making the new system work will take years. Maybe decades." "Was it worth it?" Colonel Tae-hyun Kwan asked. "The walkout, the risk, everything we went through." Min-jun thought about 7 billion Kashari, who would live instead of die. He thought about 17 species who might finally have a chance at real freedom. He thought about a galaxy that had been forced to look at itself and question what it had become. "Yes," he said simply. It was worth it. They walked back to the embassy together. Behind them, the Grand Assembly chamber stood silent but not empty. The next session would begin tomorrow. There would be arguments and setbacks. The elder species would not give up power easily. The reform would take time. But the empty seats were filled now, and the galaxy had learned something important. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to participate in something wrong, even when you cannot stop it alone. Sometimes walking out is the first step toward walking back in and changing everything. The galaxy had observed in horror as humans marched out of the assembly, but perhaps the real horror had been the realization of what the concordance had become, and the uncomfortable truth that change was possible if anyone was brave enough to demand it.